Hello everyone, how you doing? Welcome to Desert Sage Podcast. Today's August 10th, 2022, coming to you from London Bridge Beach in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. We had some errands to run and had to go into town, and so I decided to come to this beautiful location and film this walk and talk. So I'm not going to be doing much walking though today. It's getting hot already, and there's a threat of thunderstorms coming in this afternoon, so I'm going to try to get through this material as quickly as I can. So bear with me. This is important prerequisite material. Prerequisite material for episode 2, which I'll be posting shortly. It's complete, but this material is considered important knowledge if you're going to have any kind of an understanding at all of episode 2 and where we're headed with this. Remember, in episode 1 we talked primarily about the current human condition, which is slavery, how that condition exists, why it does, via the lack of knowledge of natural law and knowledge of the human psyche, and how those that understand how the human psyche work have created that power differential to keep humanity enslaved, the bulk of humanity enslaved. So I won't go into that too much further, but when we get into episode 2, we're going to be talking about methods of manipulation and the mechanisms and how exactly they go about manipulating your thoughts, your emotions, and hence your behavior, your actions. So this is important prerequisite knowledge. We're going to be talking about consciousness. We're going to be talking about and how consciousness relates to the human mind and how the brain works. And the nature of our brain. So this is all important prerequisite information, so I'd ask you to keep an open mind, particularly those of you that are of a Christian worldview. I know in the past that some of you took issue with my criticism of Christianity, and when I talk about Christianity, I'm talking about the cultural religions is what I take issue with, and the 3 primary ones in particular, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So when I take issue with them, when I criticize Christianity, I'm not criticizing the true esoteric nature of Christianity. I'm talking about and criticizing the Christianity that has evolved and what it's become. And if you, as I mentioned in the previous walk and talk, it's become fragmented into 1,000 pieces. And if you would recognize the truth, you would see that yourself. All these different denominations and whatnot, but there is an esoteric, a true hidden meaning of Christianity that's been lost, and it's been kept hidden intentionally by those that have that knowledge. So for those that are Christians and have a Christian worldview, you might find this episode very important for you, because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, number one, show you how not only through your belief, which I consider blind belief in doctrine and dogmas and things of that nature, your belief, your faith in essence, and I consider faith to be, I define faith as confidence through experience. I'm going to give you evidence to show not only the existence of God, the creator of the universe, I'm going to show you where his fingerprints lie throughout creation. I'm going to give you hard evidence to show the existence of God, not just belief, that right side of your brain, that determinist aspect of it, nor the left side, the scientific side, that randomness aspect of it. But we're going to show you how, and for those of you that are in the military, in law enforcement, in any kind of an investigative capacity, and you're still conflicted and have been conflicted throughout your careers about those especially that express Christian worldviews, you've been conflicted. You've been conflicted about your role and the morality of what it is that you've been doing or been asked to do. Not what you intended to do when you came in. You had the best of intentions, and we know where that leads. We're talking about what the law enforcement and the military, what they have become. And people can get pissed off all they want to about my criticism of both of those institutions now, but they've been captured and they've been politicized and they've been polarized. and they're nothing like the institutions that they were supposed to be. And you could go down the list with healthcare and whatnot, our education institutions, and they've been exposed. They've been laid bare for all of us to see now, the corruption, the incompetence, the immorality of those that we claim, or some people claim, should be leaders. Okay, so keep an open mind as you go through this presentation here, and I'm going to explain some principles of natural law. When we get into episode 2, we're going to distinguish between principle and law. I've talked about the difference between lawful and legal. So we're going to be talking about the difference between a principle and a law. And a principle, just quickly, is defined as a truth that creates freedom. And a law is a lie that destroys freedom and creates slavery. So just keep that in mind, and we'll get into that when we get into episode 2, but this is some prerequisite information. Please keep an open mind, and I'll try to present this in the context of a Christian worldview. But I also want those that are in the military and in law enforcement professions to pay attention as well, because especially if you're in investigative roles, if you're a detective or any kind of an investigative role, I'm going to provide you with the physical evidence, the scientific proof of the existence of a creator of the universe, and how his laws and our ability to align with those affect the outcomes, the things that we manifest in this world, to include our current conditions. So I'll try to keep it, I'll try to take the heaviness out of it the best I can, and let's get started with it. So we're going to start with talking about universal principles. Principles of natural law, and there are 7. And while I'm touching on 7, numerology and numbers are a very important aspect of the creator of the universe. Mathematics is a language of the creator of the universe. Mathematics doesn't lie. There are no contradictions in mathematics, so that's how we know the truth is there. So in any case, there are 7 principles. There's 7 days of the week. You ever wondered why? The creator of the universe, God, the all, the universal consciousness, whatever it is that term you want to give for the creator of everything, created all that is in 7 days. So we're going to talk about numerology as well as we go along here. This isn't voodoo stuff. This is scientific stuff, and it involves mathematics. So don't get all goofed out by some of these concepts and principles. So, in any case, we're going to dive into this. These 7 principles are also known by other names throughout the mystery traditions. The Egyptians called them one thing, the Greeks called them one thing. We're going to talk about one of those terms that are given to these 7 universal principles of natural law. The first one here is the 7 Hermetic principles. And this principle was named after Hermes. I'm not going to get into the history of it here, but Hermes, you've understood, and you've probably heard the term hermetically sealed. If you think about real important documents that we have at the Smithsonian, like the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, those documents are so important to the foundation of this country that they are hermetically sealed. In other words, they're processed in such a way, pressed between glass, where nothing can escape. So that's the concept of hermetically sealed. They can't escape these principles. Nothing can escape them. They're everywhere at all times, on all locations. So I also want you, when you think about the concept of God, instead of that anthropomorphic concept that most Christians have about God, when you visualize God, we have a tendency to anthropomorphize, which means we give God human characteristics that we shouldn't. We visualize him as a gray-haired, bearded man on a throne way up above in the heavens. I'm asking you to set those thoughts, those beliefs that you had about what God is and isn't aside for a second, and just listen to what I'm saying here. If you think about God, in the Christian religion, we used to, I did when I was a Christian, cultural religious Christian. Anyway, we refer to God as being omniscient, all-knowing, omnipotent, in all places at all times. So those are things that we use to describe God, because the human mind, we cannot truly understand God. We can't understand the mind of God, and what God is or what God thinks. It's beyond our capability to do that. But what we can do is understand principles of God and of God's creation. And if we think of the universe as just a metaphor for God, which is what we're going to get into here in a little bit, this will kind of come together for you. So let's get into the 7 Hermetic principles. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them right now, but as I go through this presentation, I'll be relating these principles throughout when we talk about particularly how the mind works and how those that manipulate the mind are able to use these principles to our detriment. So let's get going. Mentalism. This principle states that the all is mind. And substitute the word all for God. The all is mind. The universe and all that is, we describe the universe as everything that is, was, and ever shall be. You think about the universe and how expansive it is, you can't get your mind around it. It's difficult for you to grasp that concept of how expansive the universe is. It's the same thing with our mind and the concept of God. So the universe is mental. The second principle, correspondence. Some of these you may have heard before. As above, so below. So below, so above. Or as below, so above. Principle of vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. At some point throughout some of these podcasts, I'll be talking about Nikola Tesla and the contributions that he made to humanity, particularly in the 21st century. 20th century, one of the most brilliant minds ever. And he described, he said, if you want to understand the universe, or if you want to understand God, think about energy, frequency, and vibration. So Tesla described God in essence as everything is energy. Everything is energy. And the concepts of frequency and vibration we'll be talking about as we go along here. So principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Think about a magnet. Think about the earth. Think about you as a human. You have polarities as well, whether it's your behavior, you behave in accordance with your higher self, or you behave in accordance with your lower self. We also have polarity in terms of how we think. The mind has a tendency to swing from one side, one polarity, to another. Politicians and the government use this principle predominantly when it comes to politics. And what they'll do is polarize you to one side or another. You're either right or you're left. You're Democrat, you're Republican. They'll harden you in these polarized positions over here to keep us divided. So that's one principle that you can relate to what is occurring in reality right now in our existence. Principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. Think of the ocean. Think of your breathing in and out. Think about your emotions. Again, a lot of times they'll go in and out like a tidal wave. Your thoughts. They constantly. Well, most people unfortunately have the attention span of about 8 seconds at best, and before their thoughts grab them, because they don't have control of their minds. Their minds control them, and they pull them one direction or the next, right, left, either into the past, drag them into the past to think about how they were harmed or hurt, or drag them into the future to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow, but never in the present moment. And we said before that the present moment is called that for a reason. It's a present. All right, cause and effect. Real important one. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. And then the seventh one is the principle of gender. Now, we're not talking about biological gender here. What we're talking about are principles of energy. We're talking about characteristics, and they're in everything. They're in you. We have characteristics of both the masculine and the feminine. Not We're not talking about biological characteristics. They're already trying to confuse the hell out of kids and everybody else over those dynamics. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about principles. We're talking about first things. We're talking about characteristics of everything. Male, female, hot, cold. Again, it's the polarity is in everything as well. So, all right. We're going to talk about what is the conscience and what is consciousness, because people have a tendency to get these two words convoluted and think they're one and the same. In essence, they are, but they are not. So let's make the distinction here. What is the conscience? The conscience is the inner sense of right and wrong that enables individuals to discern moral choices freely. That is our inner compass. That is that part that is hardwired into us by the creator of the universe. We know innately in our hearts and in our minds what is right from what is wrong. We know it, but we block that voice out, that consciousness out. And consciousness is described as the state or the faculty of being aware of one's thoughts, feelings, and actions. Consciousness manifests itself in our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions, what we think, feel, and do. The totality of the thoughts, feelings, impressions, etc. of a person or group, such as a body of thoughts, etc., relating to the particular sphere, a collective awareness or sense. What this statement is that not only do we have individual consciousness, but there's also a collective consciousness in humanity as a whole that exists within the all, within the total consciousness or universal consciousness of God. Within that, there is group consciousness or collective consciousness, which is made up of individuals, or the individual consciousness. And right now, folks, as humanity as a whole is at a very low vibratory state of consciousness based because of fear and confusion, and that's been by design. The bulk of humanity is perpetually being kept in this state intentionally. And what I'm going to be describing to you today is some of those methods of manipulation. But we have to get through how the human mind works, what consciousness is, and what the conscience is. All right, so let's move on here. We talked about universal consciousness, and I ask you to put that, frame it in your mind as that is the equivalent of the mind of God. When we talk about universal consciousness, a lot of the ancient mystery traditions and religions refer to this concept. They call it by different names, but it's the same concept across all these religions. We'll get into the Trinity here, and in the Eastern traditions it's called the Trimurti. But the concept of the Trinity doesn't just exist in Christianity. It exists across all of these cultures and across all of the ancient mystery traditions. So we talk about the mind of God. I want you to frame this into the question of what if God is just a metaphor for the universe. All that exists, everything that exists, all the planets, all the stars, the galaxies, everything that exists in the universe, all from the macrocosm, the big, down to the microcosm, the very, very small. And we talk about the principle of correspondence. That's what we're referring to here. And for those of you right here in this slide, this illustration is where if you're a detective, investigator, whatever title you have, and you work for the government or you're in law enforcement in any capacity, here's where I'm going to provide you physical evidence of the existence of the creator of the universe, and where you can find God's fingerprints all over creation, including yourself. So the other part of this is, and we really are created in its image. Okay? In the Bible, if you remember, right, that Adam and Eve were created in the image of God. We were created in God's image, which means, well, if we were created in God's image, there would be signs or evidence or fingerprints of God all over us as individuals, all over nature, all over the universe. and you'll see patterns. And the next slide, or let's go back to the first slide on the left here. The upper image there is, of the upper left image is a microcosmic image taken of a brain cell. The image on the right is a macrocosmic image taken of the universe with a telescope. See here. The image in the middle there on the left is a cell splitting, the birth of a cell. The image on the right is the death of a star, showing a star splitting. The lower image on the left is of a human eye, an iris. The image on the right is of a nebula. Take a look at the slide to your right there. You'll see the patterns, the fingerprints of God all over nature, all over the universe. Everything from sunflowers to seashells, to galaxies, to DNA. What you see there in the middle there with all the numbers, and which is also represented by the formation of a hurricane, which takes on the same pattern, that's called a Fibonacci spiral, and it's based on the mathematical principle of phi, phi. It shows the eternal nature of God. This number goes on forever, kind of like pi, which is found in the perfect symbol of a circle. Pi 1.34 whatever, and goes on into perpetuity. It never ends. Phi is another mathematical formula. It's called the golden ratio. And it is found throughout nature. It's found in our fingerprints. If you take a look, detectives are very familiar, and crime analysis people and those that do crime scene processing are very familiar with the different patterns of our fingerprints, the loops, the arches, whorls, things of that nature. So this is, and if you go and look at this is just one slide or two slides that I'm using here to illustrate the scientific existence of the creator of the universe. Its fingerprints are on everything, from the galaxy down to the microcosmic, the phi spiral, the Fibonacci sequence. That spiral, go look up Fibonacci spiral, see if you can find some videos on it. They've done some tremendous work with the Fibonacci spiral and how far down microscopically they can go, and it just continues. It's never ending. Okay. Again, I mentioned numbers are important. The number one is important. It is important because if we say that God, or the all, consists of everything, and God is everywhere at all times and all places, exists in the past, present, and the future, all at once. That Trinity aspect of the Creator, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. The number one relates to that concept of unity consciousness. Everything exists in the mind of all, or that principle of mentalism. The number two is there are dual forces. We call them, those that study spirituality and the ancient traditions call them basically the masculine and the feminine forces. Martial artists, and if you take a look at the next slide here, coming up here, we'll get to that in a second, but martial artists you'll see the picture of a yin and a yang here. We'll get to that in a second. And that's a universal symbol known throughout martial arts. It's equal and opposing forces. It's a balance. It's harmony. It's for us as humans, we call that homeostasis, when we're in a state of balance and harmony. That balance exists in the mind of God as well. Those equal but opposing forces exist in the consciousness of the all. All right, let's get into, so there's a dual aspect of consciousness. There's also a trifold aspect to consciousness as well, or that Trinity. And let's get into the next slide here, and consciousness and that threefold aspect of the Trinity. For those of you that are the Christian faith, you understand a distorted view, most likely, of what the Trinity is and what it consists of. So we're going to go, and again, this concept, you will find this throughout all these ancient traditions and cultural religions, concept of the Trinity. We'll talk about this a little bit later. In this view here, you have down at the very bottom, at the base of the triangle, and you notice this is an equilateral triangle. It's equal on all sides. One side doesn't have dominance over the other one. These are all aspects of the Trinity, the consciousness of the all. We have our thoughts, and which is described as the mind, or the Creator God, or in the Christian religion, the Father. Then we have emotions, spirit, the sacred feminine principle, the Holy Spirit in Christianity. We've abdicated, or we've taken the sacred feminine aspect out of Christianity, and we substituted it for a spirit, an apparition. And the sacred feminine has been suppressed. You can see it all throughout history in the way, not only the way women have been treated and subjugated, you see that as well today in many cases. And I'm not a women's liberal feminist in any way, but I see it myself. But in any case, and then you have the body, the divine child, Christ, in the Bible, in Christianity, the Son. These are also our thoughts and our emotions, our divine thoughts and our divine emotions. God's divine thoughts, God's divine emotions create the actions or the things that are manifested into the world, and they're divine. They're divine. Christ was divine, or Christ consciousness, in other words, is what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about the historical figure Jesus, although those were the lessons that he tried to teach humanity, and he got killed for it. I'm talking about the Christ represented. He represented right action in the world. He was the representation of divine thoughts and divine action, true love, true sacrifice for humanity. All right, let's go on to the next slide here. There's also that dual aspect of our mind, and we're going to be talking about the hemispheres of the brain, the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, and those aspects of us. But in universal consciousness, this was that martial arts symbol I was talking to you about before, the yin and the yang. The yang represents the solar, the masculine, the active, the analytical, and we've touched on this before in other presentations. The dominant, the left brain, the aggressive. The yin represents the lunar, the feminine, the passive, the intuitive, the submissive, the right brain, and compassion. And in the universe, these forces are meant to work in harmony with one another. One is not to dominate the other one, either one. They're both equal, and they are to be viewed that way, equal and opposing forces. And in the martial arts, Aikido especially, we had to learn how to take somebody else's force and redirect that. If somebody was trying to come at us in an aggressive manner, and we weren't maintaining, harmony or homeostasis between the two of us here, we would redirect that force. So, for those of you that have been in the martial arts, this should look familiar to you. All right, the next slide. What this view represents is considered an aerial view of the two hemispheres of our brain, the neocortex of our brain. We have the left side and we have the right side. Again, some of these concepts aren't going to be new to some of you. Think of the left side as the masculine side. Think of the right side as the feminine side. Think of the right side as the Republican side. Think of the left side as the Democrat side. The right side's the conservative side, the left side's the liberal side. So put these concepts together here and overlap them when we start talking about the human brain and the makeup of the human brain and how it functions. So this is an aerial view of the neocortex of the two hemispheres of the brain. And when we talked about the principle of polarity, we talked about how politicians, in particular through the media particularly, are able to polarize people to one side or the other. Get people to identify as either I'm a staunch Republican, that's me. When you ask them, who you are, first they'll either tell you, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a cop, or whatever. They'll tell you what they do, But then they'll tell you, I'm a Christian, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm an atheist. Whatever the case is, those will be the next ways that they identify themselves. They attach themselves to that identity. These dark occultists know that, and they use the media and politics to play the Team Coke against Team Pepsi game. Politics is nothing but a team sport, folks. It's nothing but a fucking team sport. And they get you polarized just like they do with teams. The judicial system is polarized between your plaintiffs and your defendants, between prosecution and defense. The judge is supposed to be neutral. Well, we've seen what that has gotten us in this country. So in any case, I wanted to bring that back to, again, some of these principles that I talked to you about before. And the principle of polarity is used predominantly by the dark occultists to keep people polarized in one side or the other. Keep people polarized, and if you're locked in a left brain mentality, if you're of that master mind, there's a master mind and then there's the slave mind, the dominant and the submissive. If you're constantly locked in that master state of mentality, that master mind, that's not good. If you are in a right brain state of mind, that emotional or that slave think mind, that's not good either. What you want is a balance between the two. And we're going to talk about how the media and how government in particularly, using government and religion primarily, and the media to push these things, to polarize people, to divide people, to be that middle ground. They step in and they hijack the amygdala, a part of the brain that we're going to talk about here. It's called an amygdala hijacking. And they become the gatekeepers of your thoughts and your emotions. And then hence what you do, your actions. Okay. So next slide, we talk about the triune brain, the triune nature of the brain. We talked about the dual nature. Now we're talking about the triune nature of the brain. And in this next slide here, you'll see that there's three areas. We have the lower, or the reptilian brain, or the reptilian, they refer to it as the R complex of the brain, which is responsible for survival, fight or flight, our autonomic functions, breathing, respiration, things of that nature. When I was on the SWAT team, we had to play dual roles, several roles, since we were a smaller team. You had to train as a sniper as well as a tactician and an entry person. So this is the part of the brain that as a sniper, we were taught to shoot at, because this R complex, the cerebellum stalk, controls motor function. So even if you had your hand on a trigger and had that trigger or that gun up against somebody's head, the theory is that you hit the cerebellum stalk, that R complex, and it'll immediately decimate that part of the brain, and their motor functions will fail. They won't even be able to pull the trigger. So then we have the next part of the brain, the mammalian part, of the mammal part of the brain. This is consider that the left or the right hemisphere of the brain that we talked about, that dual side, the emotional part, responsible for pleasure and avoidance of pain, which is why most people have a distorted worldview and an unrealistic worldview, is because, like Travis Walton said, people have a tendency to view the world the way they want it to be rather than the way it really is. So we have a tendency, that part of the brain has a tendency to avoid those things that are distasteful, like shadow work, like looking at yourself, examining your own thoughts and your emotions, raising your level of consciousness, understanding what's happening around you as well, which is consciousness. All right, then the higher portion, the third aspect, the logical and thinking, the rational side, the left side of the brain. When those two hemispheres work in harmony with one another, you have holistic thinking, true intelligence, not just intellect and not just emotion, true intelligence. I think when they talk about what kind of intelligence people have, they have a tendency to equate it with intellect, the left brain only. And true intelligence involves holistic thinking, or the ability to balance both hemispheres of the brain. All right. The reason this is important here, and particularly when it comes to the R complex, these dark occultists, those people who understand, these master psychologists from these ancient bloodlines who understand this stuff, it's been passed down from generation to generation. These people live in that complex out of fear. Don't get me wrong, they're very intelligent. They're total left brain psychopaths, really, because they have no right brain. They have no care. They weren't born with that innate sense of right and wrong like we were. These are primary psychopaths, and very intelligent. Don't underestimate their intellect. Look at what they have done, how they have manipulated the world to be in the condition that it is right now, the condition of slavery, and where we're rapidly heading. So don't underestimate them. They understand the intellect. They also understand how to manipulate the intellect and the emotions. Okay. They want to keep us, humanity in general, in that reptilian state of mind and that fear-based state of confusion. And they've done a hell of a job, folks, over the last 2.5 years, particularly. This psychological operation, this mass psychosis that they've implemented across the world. They've kept people in a sustained state of fear and confusion for the last several years with the lockdowns, the isolation, how they've manipulated our primal fears, the fear of being alone, the fear of darkness, being kept in the dark. No information was given out to us. It was all kept secret and was dished out little bits at a time and amplified and magnified to their desire. So those are the three aspects or the three parts of the human brain and how they primarily function. Now, this is a generalization. It's just an overview of how the human brain works in both its dual nature and its triune nature for those that are in Christianity. All right, the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about that amygdala hijack. And remember, I said that the amygdala is a portion of the brain that's in the center, and it acts as a gatekeeper between the rational side of the brain and the emotional side of the brain. And here's the concept here. From the thalamus, a part of the stimulus, what we perceive with our five senses, either through what we observe, goes directly to the amygdala, while another part is sent to the neocortex, or the thinking brain. If the amygdala perceives a match to the stimulus, if the record of experiences in the hippocampus tells the amygdala that is a fight or flight or freeze situation, then the amygdala triggers the HPA, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and hijacks the rational brain, puts you in a state of fight or flight. On the other hand, this emotional brain activity processes information milliseconds earlier than the rational brain. So in case of a match, the amygdala acts before any possible direction from the neocortex can be received. So if you operate from the left side of the brain, or the right side of the brain, the emotional side, if it gets to the amygdala milliseconds before the rational brain has a tendency to respond to it, or to use logic or reason, it hijacks it. And that's what that statement is saying. If, however, the amygdala does not find any match to the stimulus received with its recorded threatening situations, then it acts according to the directions received from the neocortex. So if the rational brain the emotional brain isn't allowed to take over, the signal sent to the neocortex, the thinking brain, and then it acts accordingly. When the amygdala perceives a threat, it can lead that person to react irrationally and destructively. This is important. This is important for you to understand. When you are kept in a constant state of fear and confusion, when your amygdala has been hijacked, in essence, through these methods of manipulation that we're going to be talking about here, you can't think or act rationally. And in many cases, you act destructively. And we're seeing that play out throughout society. Look at the violence. Look at the street violence. Look at look at how people are being amped up into a state of hypervigilance and hatred for the others right now. They're putting the foot on the gas pedal here now, folks. Really, whether it's the recent decisions of Roe v. Wade, which got one side of that pendulum swinging, or whether it's the recent search by the FBI of Trump's home, which got the other pendulum swinging the other direction here. whether it's the transgender issue and the role of schools with our children, whether you're male or female, and confusing those roles and amplifying those and dividing people and getting hatred on both sides of. All they need for the Hegelian dialectic is for one side of it to believe it and to grab onto it, and the rest will take off. You'll get that pendulum swinging back and forth, and they have polarized people in such a state of hatred and division for the others. And Trump has done the same thing. I don't give a shit what you think about it. He has done the same thing, folks. He has been polarizing. Yes, he has spoken truth. Yes, he has had a very difficult job, but he gets criticism just like religion does. He gets criticism just like the military and law enforcement do. I can criticize the bravery and the actions of those that fought for each other and gave up their lives. I can acknowledge that. And same thing for law enforcement officers who got a damn tough job right now. I wouldn't be doing it now. Did it before, I damn sure wouldn't be doing it now, not with what it's become, not with what you're up against. Same thing with the military. Wouldn't do it now. You guys are being used as pawns, as political tools, and weaponized against, not the military yet. That's coming fast though. The military's, the woke military, is being weaponized as well, and both of those entities are being used as weapons against our freedoms. Get as pissed off and as frustrated about that statement as you want, as butthurt as you feel. I don't care. That is the truth, and you know it. But again, it doesn't take away from the bravery. I can criticize, but at the same time, acknowledging the people that created those policies that sent our men and women overseas, that send our women and men out into the streets to deal with people. I can also criticize their policies as well and their motivations for doing so. I can love this country and still criticize these evil, psychopathic fucks that create these policies that send our men and women out into these situations. Okay, so let's just get that off the table right now before we move on. All right, next slide, worldview schism. We got some pups here, looks like. Yeah, great, hopefully they won't be too disruptive. This is a great park, great park. All right, worldview schism. What happens when we do get polarized, and in both episode 1 and in episode 2, we talk about worldview and what happens when you take on this polarized worldview. You have this schism between randomness and determinism. If your worldview is that is randomness, a scientific worldview, in other words, the universe is a grand accident, there's no underlying intelligence in nature, natural law does not exist, existence is purposeless, there's no reason for us to be here, you're going to live, there's no reason for you to think you have any purpose, you're going to do your time, you're going to pay your taxes, and you're going to die. That's it. What you're here for doesn't matter. But the reality is that we are a consumer. Our culture in the United States here is consumer-based. We're consumers. We consume information. We consume goods, but we don't create anything anymore. We just don't. We just consume. So anyway, that's the randomness side of it. And these are hallmarks of atheism and scientism. Okay. On the other side, you have determinism. God controls everything in creation, every event in creation. All occurrences are preordained. Free will does not exist. Change is impossible and action is meaningless. These are hallmarks of religious extremism. And here's, when we talk about government and religion, I want you to put government above randomness. I want you to put religion above determinism, because we'll get to that here in a little bit. But those are two aspects. Government and religion are used to polarize people. Remember, we said religion, the definition of religion, religare, religion could be used to unite people when it's based in truth and freedom, or it could be used to bind people, religare, to bind, to hold back, to thwart from forward progress. So that term religion has a dual meaning as well. It can be used both ways. So, and then in the middle, we have the truth, which is both the deterministic component, which is natural law, and the random component, which is free will. And what they're trying to do here, folks, if you haven't picked up on it already, is destroy your free will. Make you think you don't have a choice. We will coerce you into doing whatever it is that we want you to do, either through force or violence, through coercion or violence. They're trying to destroy your free will. Change is impossible. Goliath is too big. What am I going to do? In the military, they call that a stand-down operation, or in law enforcement, a stand-down operation. Give up. You just stand down, and there's no reason to affect change within yourself or in the world. It is what it is, and we don't have any choice in the matter. Then we have that, they're trying to destroy that free will aspect of you, make you think you don't have it. It doesn't exist. Free will is a myth. It's a biblical myth, and it isn't. It isn't. We make choices every day. We're just not aware of a lot of the choices that we make because we've been manipulated. We've been indoctrinated. Your subconscious, that big part of the iceberg below the water there, that subconscious aspect of yourself, is where everything is at. That's where they get you, in the subconscious mind, through television, through commercials, through advertising, the media, manipulation of the language. And in episode 2, we're going to talk about the obfuscation of language as one of the methods of manipulation. Think about how they've twisted the definitions of things lately. What a pandemic is, what a vaccination is, what being vaccinated is, what the definition of a terrorist, a domestic terrorist now is. I fit that definition. I wear the shirts that are on the FBI's bulletin that came out. I saw it. I saw the FBI bulletin to law enforcement about signs and indicators of those that are considered domestic terrorists. And the shirts that I wear, the ones that I wore into every city council meeting for the most part, the ones that said, Jefferson's quote about when tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty, that is on the FBI's domestic terrorist list of indicators of people who might be a domestic terrorist. So you and I now, they've changed the definition of anybody who questions the government narrative is a domestic terrorist. You see it in the media. So when we get into episode 2, I think most of you will enjoy it because we get into the details about how they do these things. Well, Greg, you say that my mind isn't my own, my thoughts aren't my own, and I've been indoctrinated and manipulated. How exactly do they do that? Well, this is where we get into that, folks. This is where we get into it. All right, next slide. When you have that worldview schism, a schism is basically just a short circuit of the mind. When we talk about a schism, it's just a short circuit. And when we talk about that amygdala hijacking, is that gatekeeper has been hijacked and and either your emotional side of your brain is the governing aspect of what you do, or the left side of your brain, the intellectual, the master side, the dominant side of your brain is the one in control, not the neocortex or the balanced aspect of the brain. All right, so let's get to the next slide. Here is the schism of the mind. Again, we've talked about the master and the slave mind, this dual portion of the dual hemispheres of the mind, and how we can relate it to, on the master side here, to atheism. There is no God. There is, we talked about, that randomness component. There is no creator. There is no intelligence. These are signs of atheism. Solipsism. Solipsism is the belief that only I exist. Only my truth is the truth. Solipsism and scientism, the belief that science, Fauci, because he is science, that they are the only thing that exists, the belief in scientism. Moral relativism, man's law. We described when we talk about principles and law, the difference between man's law and natural law is moral relativism. And we'll get into that concept, how a certain group of individuals are given special rights to create laws and to tax us and do things like that, that other people who are supposed to have equal rights under the law and under the Creator, we're all the same under the Creator, right? Christianity teaches that. There's no difference between you and I or any other person on this earth according to the tenets of Christianity. We're all created the same under the eyes of the Creator. No differences. We're all divine sparks of that universal consciousness. No different. We're no different. But yet there are people and ancient bloodlines and those that for centuries believe that they have should be given some special right because either they are God's chosen people or they're chosen to represent God, chosen to speak on behalf of God, and we are supposed to obey them by proxy through government or religion. On the other side, you have the slave mind, religion. And so instead of thinking you're everything like the solipsist does, you have a sense of unworthiness, just the opposite. Self-loathing. And that's where a lot of people in the military and in law enforcement, whether they want to recognize it or not, find themselves. You go down and do that deep introspection work, that shadow work that I talk about, and at some point you're going to hit self-loathing. Self-hatred, in other words. You don't love yourself. You don't truly love yourself. You don't. And when you do the work that's necessary to come to that realization, it can be very liberating. So don't look at it as such a negative thing. The slave mind addiction. Again, put government on the left, religion on the right here. Order follower. I've talked about order followers. I've talked about my disdain for order followers. Those that in the military and in law enforcement, and I used the Uvalde incident as an example in episode 2. It's going to piss some people off. But I could acknowledge the difficult situation that those officers were in there, while at the same time being capable of criticizing, through my experience, their actions on that day. And again, I talk about the reasons for that. And one of the primary ones was order following. They set their consciousness up on the shelf on the orders of somebody they perceived of higher authority, out of fear of the consequences of what would happen to them, or out of whether it's physical, the threat of death or that, or the fear of the consequences of disobeying some departmental directive or some hierarchical command structure. That's the reality of it, folks. Get as ass hurt as you want. Sorry, it is what it is, and I'm going to speak the truth about it. In the middle, you have mind control, which consists of, the media, money, and malnutrition. Our perceptions, the media control our perceptions and the way we see the world, or they attempt to. They want to tell you how you should feel, how mad you should get, and who you should be mad at, and what to think. Not how to think. They damn sure don't do that. They tell you what to think. And you know that's true too. So turn off your damn TV. Get your information from the internet. We have Alexandria's library here before they burn it down or shut it off, where you can find information. Learn how to use a computer and search the internet for this stuff. Learn how to use the internet and search. Media, money, and malnutrition. Mind control. They use all three of these here. And now you see with the supply chain issues, the food that we're given, the GMO products, the crap that's put in the water and in the air that we breathe. There's a reason for that. In the military, we were given basically a high carbohydrate diet, very little protein. That was by design. That impairs your cognitive abilities when you have that kind of nutrition or lack thereof. It was by design. They wanted us in that state where they could mold and frame and indoctrinate us into the military culture. Same thing happens in law enforcement. Get down at the bottom, you see cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a state that is so uncomfortable. We have two opposing views in your mind held simultaneously. It creates such discomfort that you deliberately ignore reality. And that is what we're seeing. People deliberately ignoring the reality of what is occurring around us, particularly when it comes to the erosion of our freedoms. When it comes to the erosion of our freedoms and how that is happening right before our very eyes. All right, mind control dialectics here. The next slide, again, throughout here I've asked you to put government and religion on over the master-slave mind, over determinist and randomness worldviews, etc. Government on the left there works through the left brain and binds the right brain. And it's based on the erroneous and dogmatic belief that there is such thing as authority vested in certain human beings, which gives them special, quote, rights which others do not possess. Okay, whether it's legislators, whether it's law enforcement or the military, whether we give corporations passes, they're given special rights. Corporation, if you break down the etymology of the word corp, what is that? Corp, it's a body, right? Oration, speech, voice. So we've given through corporations dead bodies, in essence, a voice and rights that are much higher than we have. If you take a look at the COVID scam, these pharmaceutical agencies have been given special rights, special privileges, immunity from prosecution for the harm that they are causing. And yet people ignore the reality of that. They ignore the reality of the harm that has been done as a result of the COVID scam. Primarily out of a sense of apathy, because if they weren't affected initially, they didn't care. That lack of care that I talked about in the introductory video. Okay. On the right-hand side, you have religion, which works through the right brain and binds the left brain. Right brain imbalance creates blind acceptance and collectivist groupthink, leading to a condition in which willing followers will readily submit to authority. It's that master-slave think. They'll readily give to authority. And you talk about religion, people think that there's a separation between government and religion because we have it in the Constitution. That's a lie. That's a lie. They're the same, two wings of the same bird, just like Democrat, Republican. Two means and methods of controlling human behavior and thought and emotion, and hence your actions, to keep us in a state of slavery. Psychological slavery, physical slavery, and soon it will be, it's your soul that's at stake here. So that's why we're talking about these things here, folks. I know it may be difficult. I'm not doing this out of a sense of hatred or disdain for my fellow human beings, my fellow former law enforcement people, my former military people, or anybody else. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to, out of an act of selflessness, provide information to you to wake you up to the reality of what's occurring and how it's being done, the mechanics of it, so you understand fully how you've been manipulated and the state of where we are now and where we're headed if we don't change course here. I want to be an inspiration. I don't want to be an anchor that holds people back. I want to be an inspiration. I want to show you these things and hopefully inspire you to look at them as well. All right, last slide here, and then we're going to move on. I know I went a little longer than I wanted to. Again, this is important prerequisite information, and I can't stress this enough before we start moving forward, beginning with episode 2. The introductory video in episode 1 were just kind of introductory content. This is prerequisite information for the content that we're going to have moving forward, which begins with episode 2, methods of manipulation, specifically obfuscation. So, the Hegelian dialect, a framework for guiding thoughts and actions into conflicts that lead to synthetic solutions which can only be introduced once those being manipulated take a side that will advance the predetermined agenda. It's the same as controlled opposition, problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution, the Hegelian dialectic. I talked about this in the previous episodes and in the introductory video. This is how government creates that the predetermined situations. And if you take a look at how this works in operation over here on the right hand, here you see the agenda. And in this case, we're going to use the centralization of power. That's the agenda. That's always been the agenda. That's the agenda going forward here with this one world order bullshit. It's simply centralization of power, centralization of government, centralization of religion, centralization of law. Okay, So that's where we're headed. They create the thesis, which is a manufactured terrorist threat. In this particular example, they manufacture a terrorist threat, thinking, oh, I don't know, 9/11, maybe. Any terrorist threat, the Chicago, the marathon bombing, go down the list of terrorist events that we've had throughout this country. If you think that those are homegrown things that astroturf events that originate out of grassroots efforts, you're wrong. The Arab Spring didn't come up that way. Our CIA was directly involved and on the ground during that conflict, just like they are in the Ukraine, and the State Department has been there as well. These are manufactured crises, events that are pre-planned in advance, all right? Then you have the antithesis of that. You have thesis and antithesis. And the antithesis of a manufactured terrorist threat when we had 9/11 was a repressive police state, incrementally, for your own safety, for your own good. Hence, scanners in the airport, frisking, searches, things of that nature. All these incremental steps, spying on Americans, the ability to introduce propaganda back into the media. All these things happen incrementally over time, like that frog in boiling water that I talked to you about. And in the case of 9/11, they were some pretty aggressive, when you look at the Patriot Act, there were some pretty aggressive steps that were taken rapidly and are still in place. Remember, once government puts these in place, they never retract or take back. It's imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence. Government takes and never gives. Then at the bottom you have synthesis, which is the desired outcome. So between thesis and antithesis, you have synthesis. The result, what you have there is a removal of freedoms and the transfer of power from the many to the few. And that cycle just keeps perpetuating itself, keeps going on. And that's where we're at, folks. Except they have their foot on the accelerator here. But we're sticking a stick in their spokes. That's what we're doing by exposing these things, by calling out government officials when they lie and when they're immoral and when they try to operate out of saying that they're transparent but are opaque as hell. We're trying to hold accountable these people and bring accountability back and responsibility back to you as individuals for your thoughts and your emotions and your actions. Quit letting government, big daddy, big mommy government dictate to you what happens, or corporations. We're trying to get you to get your power back is what those of us that are spreading this information, talking about natural law. This is not religious talk. What I'm giving you is scientific. What I've given you today is scientific evidence, or at least to get you started on that path to discovery. I pointed you with slides showing you the fingerprints of the creator of the universe, both in nature, in the universe, and within us. So my hope is that you'll be inspired to take that information and build on that, to go do your own research, come to your own conclusions. Don't believe me, but for God's sakes, stop believing the media and government and your religious leaders. Go find out for yourself. Go find out the truth for yourself. You don't need an intermediary between you and the creator of the universe. You don't need anybody to forgive your sins. You don't need anybody to speak for you or on behalf of you. You don't need anybody to represent you as a free and sovereign human being, nor do you need it to speak to the creator of the universe. So with that, I'm going to close. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. I hope you appreciated the scenery here today. I know I did. Next episode, episode 2, will be posted soon. We get into the nitty-gritty about methods of manipulation, beginning with obfuscation. So until next time, freedom, truth. Take care.